The first thing you notice when you step inside the historic house is the craftsmanship. The carved woodwork, the high ceilings, the quiet elegance from another century. You move slowly from room to room, admiring the details. The polished banisters, ornate trim, as sunlight filters through tall Victorian windows. Everything feels still. As you begin to climb the beautiful staircase, your footsteps echo softly in the silence. Halfway up, you stop. You get the strange feeling that someone is behind you. Not a sound exactly, just the unmistakable sense that you're not alone.
The individual that appeared behind me that day, he was a man, tall, slender, dressed in black. He had a sort of grayish beard.
I'm Nadine Bailey, and this is Haunted Canada. Today, I'm joined by Inés Bonacossa as we travel to downtown Winnipeg, Manitoba, to a red brick Victorian mansion that has stood more than a century. This is Dalnavert After Dark. On a quiet street in downtown Winnipeg, just a stone's throw from the Assiniboine River, stands a house that looks frozen in time. Tall red brick walls, a narrow tower reaching towards the sky, and tall windows that glow softly at night. Visitors know it as the Dalnavert Museum. But when it was first built in 1895, it wasn't a museum. It was a home belonging to one of the most powerful families in Canada. And according to some people, it might still be theirs. But back in the early 1890s, Winnipeg was booming. Known as the Gateway of the West, the city has long been a crossroads. When the railway arrived, businesses boomed and fortunes were being made overnight. And among the city's rising elite was a man named Hugh John Macdonald. His name carried a powerful legacy. His father was John A. Macdonald, the country's first prime minister. He was the only son with his first wife, Isabella Clark Macdonald. He was born on March 13, 1850, in Kingston, Ontario. His mother died when he was 7 years old, and he went to live with his paternal aunt and her husband. During the summer of 1866, Hugh John served with the 14th Battalion Volunteer Militant Rifles near Cornwall in anticipation of the Fenian invasion. He then enrolled at the University of Toronto and served with the Queen's Own Rifles of Canada as a rifleman. In 1869, he received a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Toronto and then went on to study law in Toronto and Ottawa. At the same time, he was rising the ranks and became a sergeant before joining the expedition of Colonel Garnet John Wolseley. The Wolseley expedition, as it became known, was formed to put down Louis Riel's Red River Rebellion. Hugh John wasn't content to live in his father's shadow. He had his own ambitions. He became a decorated soldier from the Northwest Rebellion, and then he became a lawyer. Hugh John was called to the bar in 1872, and soon after he joined his father's firm. As the years went by, he met Jean Murray King and fell in love. In 1876, the couple married and had one daughter, Isabella Mary Daisy Macdonald, a year later. Sadly, Hugh John's wife, Jean King Macdonald, died a few years later in 1881 as a result of her fragile health, which was due to Daisy's birth. Grieved by the death of his first wife, Macdonald moved to Winnipeg in 1882 and set up his own law practice. A year later, he married Agnes Gertrude von Kaufnet, the daughter of a close family friend and his father's political ally. They would soon have one son, John Alexander, Jack Macdonald. And by the 1890s, he wanted a home that reflected his status. He had entered federal politics by 1891, when he was elected to the House of Commons of Canada and was sworn in beside his father to applause from members of both sides of Parliament. After his father's death later that year, Hugh John had little interest in staying in Ottawa, and so by 1893 he resigned his seat. That same year, he purchased land on Carleton Street in Winnipeg. 2 years later, in 1895, construction on his new mansion was complete. They named it Dalnavert, and it rose proudly above the street. Designed by architect Charles H. Wheeler, it was built in the elegant Queen Anne Revival style. But Dalnavert wasn't just beautiful, it was modern. In 1895, the house had electric lights, indoor plumbing, and even a telephone, luxuries that many homes wouldn't see for decades. Inside, the Macdonald family lived in Victorian comfort. Hugh John, his wife Agnes, and their children. The house quickly became a center of social life, political meetings, formal dinners. Because in 1896, Prime Minister Charles Tupper persuaded John Hugh to return to federal politics as Minister of the Interior and Superintendent General of Indian Affairs. That same year, he was re-elected, but his victory was later declared void in 1897, and he returned to Winnipeg, where he shifted to provincial politics. In March, he was asked to lead Manitoba's struggling Conservative Party, and he spent the next 2 years traveling across the province to rebuild support. The efforts worked, because on January 10, 1900, he became Premier of Manitoba, but he didn't stay in office for long. He resigned by October to run for a federal seat he didn't win. After the loss, he abandoned politics and returned to his law practice and domestic life at Dalnavert, where music often drifted through the halls. The home was alive with conversation and ambition. But houses remember things, and sometimes they don't forget. The home was named Dalnavert, after the family's ancestral home in Scotland. Carriages arrived at the front gate. Important visitors walked through the heavy oak doors. For a brief moment, Dalnavert was home to the province's most powerful man, and inside, deals were discussed and decisions were made that shaped the future of Manitoba. But after John Hugh retired from politics, life wasn't exactly peaceful.
Well, when they moved into this house, Daisy, who was the daughter of Hugh John Macdonald and his first wife, was 17, and Jack, who was the son of Hugh John Macdonald and his second wife, Lady Agnes, was 10. So they were not children. They were. She was already older, the daughter, and Jack, as I said, he was 10 years old. He was very active. He was a rower. He good student. He wanted to become a lawyer, and he started going to the law school at the University of Manitoba. But unfortunately, he had diabetes at a time when nothing could be done for it. And so he passed away in 1905. He was 20 years old.
That's Inés Bonacossa. She's a volunteer at the museum as collections registrar and knows the history of the house like the back of her hand. She said that the family was faced with Jack's difficult diagnosis, which at the time had no real treatment.
They had all kinds of concoctions that they were using in those days, but basically they were herbs and all kinds of things that were not really going to change the outcome. They knew already that whatever was going on came from the pancreas, but the discovery of insulin was really ways off.
Still, Dalnavert remained the family home. Years passed. Winnipeg continued to expand beyond the old neighborhoods. The grand houses near downtown slowly began to lose their prestige. But the Macdonald family stayed until one quiet year when everything changed. In 1929, Sir Hugh John Macdonald died at the age of 79. After more than 30 years in the house, the family's connection to Dalnavert came to an end, and Ines said that's when the widow soon moved away.
Lady Agnes sold the house and all of its contents and moved into an apartment. Their son Jack had passed away in 1905, and so she would have been alone in this house. And so she sold it and moved into an apartment. And this place became a rooming house.
The family's belongings were auctioned, and the once lively mansion fell silent for the first time since 1895. Dalnavert stood alone. By the 1940s and the 1950s, Winnipeg had changed dramatically. Downtown was no longer filled with wealthy families. Many of the old mansions were abandoned or converted, and Dalnavert became a rooming house. Its walls were divided, and grand rooms became tiny apartments. As many as 17 tenants lived inside the old mansion. Layers of wallpaper covered the original designs. Paint covered the woodwork. The elegant Victorian home slowly disappeared beneath decades of alterations. Yet the structure remained, watching, waiting, until Inés said in 1969 it almost vanished forever.
Until the 1960s, when they were going to tear it down. I'm not really sure whether they were going to build a parking lot or a high-rise. I'm not really sure about that, but it was going to be bad. And the Manitoba Historical Society got into the picture. They rescued it. And in 1974, it reopened as a museum. And it has been a museum ever since.
Dalnavert had been purchased by a development company who wanted to build a modern apartment tower. But the people of Winnipeg stepped in, and a new path was forged for the stately home. Restoring was another challenge entirely. When the workers began the renovation, they discovered just how much had been hidden. Layers of paint and wallpaper were carefully, patiently peeled back, and slowly, the house began to reveal its original face again. After years of work, Dalnavert reopened as a museum on June 18, 1974. Visitors could finally see the house as it had looked in 1895. But the restoration uncovered something else. Stories. From staff, from visitors, from people who had stayed late inside the house. Stories that suggested the Macdonalds had never left Dalnavert after all.
They are part of the building. You know, it's. I think it comes with the fact that it's a Victorian home. When you see movies with ghosts and spirits, they're always Victorian homes. They're never flat bungalows. They have to be old and Victorian. That is a part of that. But yes, they're definitely here.
Inés said she had her first strange experience, while working in the attic back in January of 2015.
There was an office in the attic in the house where I was working at a computer. And something that people usually notice is that this house doesn't creak. With all the wood that it has, it never creaks, so you don't hear a sound. And it was a nice January, of course, cold, snowy, and everything else. So there were no noises, nothing. And I was working at the computer, and all of a sudden I felt that there was somebody behind me. Without question, it was just so clear. So I stood up and turned around, and I faced whoever was there standing at the door, and I introduced myself. I said, "My name is Inés. I am working here I don't wish anyone any harm. I said, I wish you peace. And I turned around and I sat back at the computer. And why I didn't feel scared, I honestly don't know. But I thought that it was the thing to do, to introduce myself anyway. And as for saying that I didn't wish anybody any harm, they knew that by now. Because I work with the collection so much, there is no place in this house where I have not been, drawer that I haven't opened, closet that I haven't walked in. So they were used to seeing me. And so whoever was here, they knew that I wasn't going to create any problems for anybody. As for the individual that appeared behind me that day, he was a man, tall, slender, dressed in black. He had a sort of grayish beard. And it's interesting because once somebody, I was complaining that I never get to see anyone. And somebody said, but you do. What happens is that I don't see them the way I see you, but I see them in a way. So eventually, by asking a lot of questions, I realized that that gentleman actually was a physician, and he was Jack's physician.
To understand what was happening in the house, Inés began using a pendulum to communicate with the spirits in the home.
So all of a sudden, here I am talking to spirits. That came totally out of left field for me. And so after that, I started to try and communicate with whoever was here. And at first, I have to say that I was spending a tremendous amount of time on that, to the point that I was leaving here and I was feeling totally drained. And I knew that I had to step back a bit.
While Jack did pass away in one of the home's bedrooms, his spirit has never been seen. Instead, Inés says she's only encountered his physician, who spent countless hours caring for Jack and often likes to wander throughout the house. But she is also certain the physician wasn't the only spirit in the museum.
A while back, there was a group of people who would spend the night here at Dalnavert writing. And there was somebody staying in Jack's room. Everybody likes going to Jack's room. And all of a sudden, the closet door slammed. Well, closets here, the doors don't slam because the house is too solid for that. So automatically, that person assumed that because of that, that meant that Jack was there. I had been watching some paranormal shows on television. And one thing that I learned to ask was who they were and whether they needed any help. So eventually I went back to Jack's room. I opened the closet door and there was somebody there, no question. Except that it was not Jack, it was an indigenous person. And I asked him and I said, is there anything that I can do to help you? And the answer was no. But by then I knew that the crew of a paranormal show called The Other Side were going to come. And they are all indigenous. And one of the people in the group was an elder. So what I asked this individual in the closet, and I said, okay, there is an elder who is going to come soon. And I said, will he be able to help you? And the answer was yes. So when this group came, the first thing that I did was to talk to the elder and to explain to him what the issue was. So once the filming ended, he came back the next day alone. And so we went into Jack's room and he opened the closet. And definitely that was an indigenous person. There was absolutely no question about that. And the elder, who was, he was a beautiful human being, really. And he talked to him for a very long time, talking about himself, talking about me. And telling him to face the sun, to face the light. And then he sang the most absolutely beautiful song I've ever heard in my life. It was just unbelievable. Jack's room is relatively small, so it sort of reverberated. It was just beautiful. And that was it. And after that, whoever that individual was, he was gone.
Long before Dalnavert was a stately mansion, the land and region were home to the indigenous nations of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples. It is also the heartland of the Métis Nation, whose culture and history are deeply rooted in the Red River region. And over the decades, since Dalnavert reopened as a museum in 1974, visitors to the building have frequently reported experiences that are hard to explain. Some believe one of the spirits belongs to Hugh John Macdonald.
And sometimes he is in Jack's room. There is a rocking chair beside Jack's bed. When he's there, he's sitting on the rocking chair and the physician is standing at the end of the bed. No, Jack is not there. And it's kind of funny when I think about it, because sometimes I try to convince both of them to go towards the light. And something that I have said to them more than once, there is nothing that anybody could have done to save Jack, because there is also lots of guilt there. And I can understand that. A father doesn't want to lose a child. Physicians don't want to lose a patient. There is no way around that. And so it's funny because I always tell them, I said, you know that you can trust me. And they always said yes, but they're still there. So, okay, whatever works.
Why some spirits remain in a place and others leave is unknowable. However, Inés feels a connection to the ones inside the Dalnavert Museum.
Something that happened to me not long ago, we have this place in the attic. And there was a cane that belonged to Hugh John Macdonald in there on exhibit for as long as I can remember. And one day somebody decided to change the exhibit. So I brought the cane and I had it in the collections room and I was cleaning it. It has a nice silver ring and I was polishing that. And I was going to put it in the study, which is where Hugh John did his work. So anyway, I am alone in the collections room just cleaning it. And I hear Ines. So I walked out and I said, is anybody calling me? And nobody had said no, nobody said your name, and said, okay. And because the collections room where I usually do the work is in the visitor center, it's not part of the house, it's attached to it. So I got my pendulum, I always carry it with me, and I said, Sir Hugh John, are you here? And the answer was yes. Well, to make a long story short, the reason why he was here, calling my name, because he was happy that the cane was no longer upstairs and I was going to put it back in the study where it belonged. So it was funny because a couple of days later I was talking to Sam, actually, and I said, I think that Hugh John was here. I said, Ines, I know, when you started asking if anybody had called you, nobody had. And I said, we knew that something was off. So then, by now they know if there is something strange has to do with me.
Although Inés seems comfortable with the unseen presence, it's not the same for everyone who spends time inside the old mansion.
People throughout the years, they have had experiences. In some cases, they have found them frightening experiences. There are some people who have smelled scents. We had a volunteer who, on her first day, I think here, she was going up the stairs in the house and smelled perfume, a woman's scent perfume. And then we had another group doing paranormal work, the Ghost Hunters of the Grand River. And one of them walked into the kitchen and immediately smelled tobacco smoke. And there are other people here who have experienced things. When somebody gets a little bit upset, I'm talking about the spirits, not the volunteers. They do things. And at one point in time, we have two sinks here. One is in the kitchen and one is the butler's pantry. And those faucets are never open. The water never runs. Except that one day they were getting upset over something. And one of the volunteers was telling me, he said, Ines, all of a sudden the water is running in the kitchen and we didn't know why. So whenever something happens, the first thing that they do is to tell me, said, Inés. So I went back into the dining room because that was where the person who was upset was. And I just started asking questions about what had upset her. It was a lady. And so eventually I figured it out. Yeah.
Inés admits that she is content to be a conduit for those old souls that remain within the walls of the Dalnavert Museum. And once in a while, she's even surprised by what she sees when she communicates with them.
I have to admit that I don't check very often in the study. I usually concentrate more on the second floor, and because that's where the bedrooms are, and on the third floor where the attic is. There is a gentleman in there who has nothing to do with the house, who I believe he was with the military. And it is funny and it is frustrating because I always ask, would you allow me to see you? And the answer is always no, like just hello, enough already. So one day I said, would you allow me to see you? And he said no, but all of a sudden there was a flash of light against a door. And it was not a reflection of anything. It was just a flash of light. I said, oh, so I guess I saw him.
Inés has been with the museum for many years and feels protective over the house and its inhabitants.
As I said, we had groups of paranormal investigators here, the people from the other side and the people from the ghost hunters. They're very serious paranormal investigators. And I have learned a lot from them. And I remember once somebody said to me, and I said, you are very protective of the spirits. I think it was an accusation. I'm not really sure about that. You're very protective. Okay, fine. And my answer at the time was, yes, I am. As I was talking to the people from the ghost hunters, and I was saying to them, and they're being indigenous, they understood what I was trying to say, was that the way I look at spirits in the house, or anywhere else for that matter, at one point in time, they were flesh and blood, just like we are. And that therefore they are entitled to be treated with respect. Anything short of that, for me, is unacceptable. So am I protective? Yes, I am. I really feel very strongly about that, and which is one of the reasons why when Halloween comes, and we have all kinds of things, death-related, spirit-related, people are always looking for ghosts, looking for orbs and things like that. And I don't know if they're expecting to hear chains rattling or something like that. I honestly don't know. So whenever that is going to happen, I make sure that I go to the rooms where I know that somebody's likely to be there. And I try to explain to them. And I said, these people are here to have fun. People come to be scared, really. And they're not meaning anybody any harm. So and I said, please try to understand that. Because I always tell them, we need the money.
If you happen to visit the museum, don't be surprised if you experience something. The most common story isn't about what people see. It's about what they feel. Many guides say there are moments inside Dalnavert when the house feels occupied. Cold spots appear suddenly in certain rooms. Some people describe the sensation of someone brushing past them in a hallway. Others say They feel as if someone is standing just behind them when they're locking up at night. Like the house is always watching, waiting. But when they turn around, there's no one there. So the next time you find yourself in Winnipeg, Manitoba, stop by Dalnavert Museum. And if you happen to stand alone in a 130-year-old Victorian mansion late at night, and you hear footsteps upstairs, it will not be hard to wonder if someone else might still be there with you. Thank you for joining me as we explore the Dalnavert Museum, and a special thanks to volunteer Inés Bonacossa for taking the time to talk with me, and to Samantha Machado, Museum Service Manager. I really do appreciate it. If you want to check out Dalnavert Museum, I will link their website in the show notes. Do you have a ghost story or paranormal encounter? If yes, email it to me so that I can share with the listeners on this podcast. Haunted Canada is sponsored by the Edmonton Ghost Tours. I will link it in the show notes. Haunted Canada is written and produced by me, Nadine Bailey, with senior producer Dila Velasquez. Production and sound design is by Rob Johnston, with help from Corey Price. If you would like to support this podcast, please follow and share, and tell a friend about this podcast. We would also appreciate a like and a 5-star written review. Also, you can follow me under different social media platforms, including TikTok and my YouTube channel, Haunted Canada. Do you have a ghost story, haunting, or true crime about your house, a museum, a resort, anywhere really, that you would like for us to cover on this podcast? If yes, you can email me through the website, hauntedcanada.com. Hey everyone, I've got some exciting news. I will be hosting a haunted and paranormal tour of Ireland in partnership with my friend Joanne at Expedia. We will be visiting haunted locations, staying in haunted castles, and exploring many historical places while delving into ghost hauntings and paranormal activity, so be sure to bring your EMF reader. I'll be able to provide more information about this soon, but till then, keep checking the website hauntedcanada.com, where I'll post all about the tour, a detailed itinerary, and how you can book. I can't wait to explore Ireland with you. Space is limited, so remember to book early. Thank you from all of us at Haunted Canada and Curious Cast. Have a good night, everyone, and stay haunted.